Here.
All right, good evening. Welcome to all of you who made it out here tonight. My name is Cindy Dobrez. I'm the Vice President of the OIAS. And we are really enjoying this year our partnership with Muskegon County Nature Club. And I know there's some new people here tonight that haven't been to one of these programs, and we appreciate the joint support. Muskegon is coordinating the hikes, and we are in the field trips, and we are coordinating the programs and sharing the costs of those, and we really love seeing this larger group to come and share the expertise of our presenters. Tonight, we have this young man who reached out and was proactive. Lucas Timmer works as a civil engineer in Holland, and a little over a year ago, our board received some emails. He started stalking us, saying, I'm working on some projects, and they're going to be impacting bird habitat, nature habitat, and I'm wondering if you'd like to be involved in that, or if we could do some planning together, or reach out to these projects and try to make a difference before it's too late and we look at something that's been cemented over or a habitat that's been removed that was crucial. So it didn't take much to convince us that he had the expertise and the connections that we needed to learn about these projects. So we, as a board, from the bylaws we created a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee. It's a committee of one. It's Lucas Timmer, and he's been doing a fabulous job as that one-person committee. And then by the springtime, we needed people to join our board, and we were hearing silence out there. So we said, Lucas, you're already on a committee on the board. Maybe you should be a board member too. And so our membership, he agreed, and our membership elected him, and he has been serving us and keeping us informed, and really making some good progress on some of the projects in Ottawa County. And I'm sure some of this work extends beyond Ottawa to other neighboring counties like Muskegon. And we can learn from his work to help a lot of places. We also have that upcoming program about backyard habitat, which is going to be crucial. I've been reading Doug Calamy's Nature's Best Hope, and they're publishing a juvenile edition of that, young readers edition, that's coming out in March. And I have a preview copy of that I've been looking at as well, because we really need to take care of those small backyards. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Lucas has to tell all of us tonight. And I'm missing Glenn Miller right now. I know that the video feed is looking good, but don't text me about it.
Beth said they can see you from home.
Good.
Good.
All right.
It's perfect.
So I want Judy Manning to be happy.
Right, that's good.
Yes.
Lucas, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. Once again, my name is Lucas Timmer, and I'm going to present today on bird habitat conservation in Ottawa County. So to give you guys a little information about me, my lovely wife Molly is here tonight. We've been married since 2016, so we're going to be going on 7 years. So that's quite something. So glad she stuck with me. So I am also a civil engineer. I work for a firm called Prine & Newhoff. We have offices in Grand Rapids and Holland and also in Muskegon. So I typically do a lot of work more in water distribution, wastewater, so making sure you guys can flush your toilets and never see that byproduct ever again. Also get involved in stormwater management, so that's like with county drains or with storm sewer systems. And we also, I've also been involved in shared use paths. So I don't know if you've been to the Holland area at all, or Park Township or Zealand, but they have a ton of bike paths through that area. And that was something that our company worked really hard with and promoted that, and it's now been an awesome resource for our community. And I know some of you guys are from Grand Haven as well, and they're catching on too and getting a lot of great bike paths for people to use for recreation. So I became my process of becoming a birder took a while. So when I was about Malcolm's age back there, I loved penguins. So those are my favorite animals. Didn't really realize at the time though that birding was an option. So I kind of gave up that love of penguins, and when I graduated from college, my lovely wife Molly bought me a Kaufman field guide. I'm like, oh, I can become a birder. But I don't know if anyone received like a Kaufman North American field guide. When you open that, when you know nothing about birds, it's extremely intimidating. I'm like, man, that's a lot of birds, and I don't think I'm ever going to learn any of these. So ended up getting the board game Wingspan. I don't know if anyone has played it. Sounds like a few. It's awesome. So it's a wonderful board game. You have all these different birds that you play in habitats, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But that really started sparking that interest. So when the pandemic came about, I think maybe even Molly might have shown me the Audubon app, and I decided to download it and try it. And maybe Molly might wish that she didn't show that to me. It's definitely turned into an obsession, which a lot of us birders know about. So yeah, just excited to be here tonight too to present. And getting that obsession in birding, you naturally get an obsession then with conservation, right? We want to keep seeing birds. So tonight's presentation will begin with the difference between preservation and conservation. So a lot of us use those interchangeably. Before I even prepared for this presentation, I kind of thought they were the same thing, but there's some interesting history about what the difference is between them. And I'll go into some detail why I think we should be the Habitat Conservation Committee and not necessarily the Habitat Preservation Committee. I'll also talk about why we should care. I think it's pretty obvious to all of us probably why we should care, but it'll be good to go through some data and really understand why bird habitat matters. I'll also go into some information on what habitat for birds needs to be conserved. And then we'll go into some stories about the Washtenaw Islands Audubon Society Conservation Committee, some things that we've done, some things that we're looking to do. One of those things is getting more people involved. So looking at you, Jeff, we need you to join. Haley, you as well. We could definitely use help. So, and then we'll talk about some future work and goals too. I tend to be a dreamer, so these are some big goals, but hopefully we have a lot of time to see some of these things happen. So starting with preservation. So preservation involves protecting the environment from all harmful human activities. So John Muir is kind of the founder of that movement in a sense, more or less. And what John Muir kind of ended up leading to was the National Park Service, which I'm guessing many of us have enjoyed some of the amazing parks that our country has to provide. So conservation involves protecting the environment with the responsible use of natural resources. So that was by Gifford Pinchot. And Gifford Pinchot and John Muir were buddy-buddy for a while, but as their beliefs in preservation and conservation changed, they started to diverge paths a little bit, which is interesting. And that's how our U.S. Forest Service, in a sense, was founded. Gifford ended up being the first leader of the U.S. Forest Service. So in conclusion, though, it's not necessarily we should have one or the other. We can't necessarily protect all land and not have human influence because we're all humans here and we all use this land, right? But at the same time, it's good to protect some land and also have some land that's set aside that can also be used in a responsible way, in a sustainable way by humans like ourselves. So that's where Teddy Roosevelt comes into play. He looked at both of these ideas and merged them together. And thanks to that, we have the U.S. Forest Service now and also our national park system. So this is a question for you guys in the audience. So there's this study that came out by the journal Science in 2020, and it details how many birds that they have estimated through their research that we have lost between 1970 and 2020. So does anyone have any idea in North America alone how many birds we've lost in that time frame? So I want a number, yeah. So say that louder, Malcolm.
3 billion.
We've lost 3 billion birds. That's what's estimated between 1970 and 2020. So that's an alarming number that should alarm all of us. When you look at a graph like this, you can see that they estimate about 10 billion birds, and now we're down to 7 billion birds, maybe slightly above that. So it's something that we all should be concerned of. All of us love nature, we love birds, and those numbers are really quite shocking, right? So some of these birds that have been impacted include migratory birds. So I'm guessing a lot of people know what this orange guy is here, the Baltimore Oriole. So they've had, since 1970, an estimated 40% loss. So if you were around in the 70s, which some people in the audience were, I was not, but you could find a lot more Baltimore Orioles back then than you can now. And in general, for migratory birds, they're down 28%. For aerial insectivores, that's birds like barn swallows, purple martins, tree swallows. Their numbers are down 32%. So there's a lot less barn swallows around as well. There's a 40% loss in barn swallows over the last 50 years. So this also is an alarming graph and something just that's good for us all to be aware of. So you can see the different bird types and what type of habitat they're found in and what type of losses they have. So eastern forest birds have had a loss of 17%. Those are birds we can find here in Michigan in our forests. We can also find shorebirds, typically through migration. You'll find them at the Muskegon wastewater plant or the Coopersville wastewater plant, and their numbers are down 37%. What I find the most shocking and alarming, and probably one of the reasons why I'm up here presenting, is our loss in grassland birds. So we've lost 53% estimated of grassland birds in North America. And that's heartbreaking, really. There are some amazing and beautiful birds. And we'll go into some more detail on why we've seen those losses in North America, Michigan, and even more specifically Ottawa County. So why should we care about bird habitat conservation in Michigan? So a great resource that you can read and look into is the Michigan Breeding Bird Atlas. So did anyone in this audience volunteer for any of that? So Rick, you did? That's awesome. And I know the Mannings are probably listening online. I believe they helped out. I don't know if Beth Miller did. I know she's helped out with some bird surveys. But the Michigan Breeding Bird Atlas provides some great information on bird populations. So the first one was done in 1983 through 88 when all the field work was done. The next one that was done was 2002 through 2008. So I'm guessing we're going to be getting close to another breeding bird survey, so Malcolm maybe can be a part of that in the future. So they have some really interesting information, and you can see Ottawa County right here. So you can see that Park Township and Holland Township, they've had losses of species between their two breeding bird atlas. So that's it looks like they've lost either 26 to 50 or even more than that. But if you guys have been to that area, what does Holland Township look like today? So it's pretty much all neighborhoods, right? So it's all been developed. There's a lot of industry as well, but it's changed a lot over the last so many years. So here are some interesting tables about from the Michigan Breeding Bird Atlas too. So this compares the levels of different birds, including birds that are considered endangered, threatened, of special concern, or extirpated. So extirpated was a new term. I had never heard that term before being a birder, but extirpated means that the bird's not necessarily extinct, but they can no longer be found in an area that they used to be found. So there are birds like loggerhead shrike. I don't know if anyone's seen one of those in Florida, but you used to be able to find them in Michigan here, which is crazy. And because of our loss of grassland habitats, they're not found anywhere typically in Michigan. They've mostly been extirpated. King rail is another example. They were found in small numbers in Michigan, but they're a lot more difficult, if not impossible, to find now just due to the lack of wetland habitat. So here are a couple birds too that I'm going to talk about in more detail later on. So we've got the American bittern. That makes one of my favorite wetland bird calls, I would say. Iconic. Black tern. It's a beautiful bird. You can find them by Bruce's Bayou, and really it's just a stunning one to see flying around. We've got king rail, like we discussed. We also have some grassland birds like northern harrier and Henslow sparrow. And then the bottom one right here is least bittern, which I think I love the coloring on that bird. So this next table shows some of the largest declines in birds. So I presented a few pictures of some of the largest declines. So purple martins between the two breeding bird atlases have lost 57% of their townships. That's how they calculated the amount of loss. They said For the first Michigan Breeding Bird Atlas, there was 57%, additional townships than there are now. So they've had a substantial loss. And I know this society has done a lot of cool stuff with purple martins, and when you see them as the #1 bird in terms of losses, we need to keep doing that because they're a very special bird. Red-headed woodpeckers as well have had a close to 50% decline. Aerial insectivores, like we talked about, like the common nighthawk, they've had substantial losses as well due to things like insecticides taking out insects and lack of good habitat for them. So upland sandpipers and bobolinks and American kestrels even. Kestrels are a bird you can pretty commonly see in Ottawa County out in the country, but their numbers have also, it's amazing how much their numbers have gone down as well, and very concerning. So why should we care about bird habitat conservation now in Michigan, or Ottawa County? So we started in North America, then Michigan, and now we're looking at Ottawa County. So what's been happening in Ottawa County besides local county politics, but what type of growth have we been having in Ottawa County? Does anyone know what % growth we've been seeing from the 2010 to 2020 census?
Largest in the state, right?
Yep, it's the largest in the state, so Cindy's right. We've grown 12%. So largest, fastest growing county in the state. Third fastest is Kent County, our neighbor. Fourth fastest is Allegan. Muskegon County is growing, it's lagging a bit behind, but I think that's going to be another spot that we're going to continue to see growth. This is a great area to live. Great weather, like Michael's saying. If you don't like winter right now, I miss it. But yeah, we've had substantial change in this area, and especially in Ottawa County. So in the 2010 to 2020 census, some of the townships that seen the largest growth are Jamestown. I don't know if anyone's been over to Hudsonville recently, but you can see where the Jamestown Mire is and all the development south, and they're just going to continue to grow. They're a big feeder community into Grand Rapids. So we've seen a lot of growth also where Michael works in Allendale. So Michael, you said you were a professor at Grand Valley for 30 years, but it's probably unbelievable the amount of change you've seen.
It's very different.
Yeah, it's a completely different place than even 30 years ago. Port Sheldon Township also has been growing a lot. So that's a beautiful township between Holland and Grand Haven. Great location to live. Jeff, you live there, right? So
Yep.
that area has been changing a lot too. So they've had a lot of growth. So let's go to the next one. So I love maps. I'm an engineer. I work a lot with maps and this program called Geographic Information Systems. So I was able to find this really neat map that shows 1962 aerial, and I'm going to compare it to the 2021 aerial. So does anyone have a guess where this is? This is somewhere in Ottawa County. And some hints are there's a lot of muck. That dark black is all that muck. So does anyone have an idea where this area is? Do you have an idea, Malcolm? It is very close to Allendale. Yeah, it's a little south of there. So it's near AAA sod farm. Has anyone got birding there?
Oh, okay.
So this is Georgetown. So I'll jump between just for dramatic effect. So we see a lot of farm fields, hay fields, and what do we see now here?
Little subdivision
All
roads.
development, right? And to be fair and out of full disclosure, I am one of the engineers for Georgetown Township. So I've seen this growth, right? It's grown a lot. There's a lot of private developers that are developing this land. And there are a lot of demand to live in Ottawa County. So that's had a substantial growth. So this next area, this one's for Michael. So Michael, you know where this is?
Was that Allendale? Is that?
Yeah, that's Allendale. So you can see Allendale has also changed a lot. And there's even a lot more room in a sense that it probably will keep growing. I mean, I don't expect a lot of those farm fields to stay there forever, right? I think Allendale is going to continue to grow as Grand Rapids area grows. So you can see there's been a lot of change too in Allendale from 1962 to 2021. So does anyone know this location right here? So this was even before 196 was put in, which is interesting. but this is where I grew up. So this is also where my mom grew up. So my mom grew up in Zeeland. This is Zeeland right here. And my mom tells me stories just of how different Zeeland used to look. That everything south of, we call it the highway, Chicago Drive there, was just all farm field. But now, you know, it's all development, right? There are a lot of demand for homes and a lot of great businesses in this county, and we need a lot of places for people to live. So this last one should be more relevant to the people in the audience, but anyone know where this is in Ottawa County? The hint is the airport.
No.
Where we see, like, that big dude, is that where it's
Yep, you're right on. Yep, good job, Malcolm. So yeah, that big dune area is kind of near like the Rosie Mound area, right? So this is like Grand Haven Township. So what stands out with Grand Haven Township is, yes, they've seen a lot of growth, but what is this area right here? Does anyone know what that is?
Hoffman Park.
Yeah, Hoffman Preserve, right? So it's nice to see a great habitat, great birding location, a lot of wildlife there, but we can know that when we look at the aerial for 2060, that's going to still be a preserve, right? So another resource that I use on why we should care about bird habitat conservation is the Birds of Ottawa County. So Carl and Judy did an awesome job putting this together with Chip Frankie. I'm guessing a few of us in the audience have this book. And they have some really great information about how birds and bird sightings have changed throughout Ottawa County. So Jim Poncher is an Ottawa County birder. Has anyone met him? I have not met him. Michael, you have? So seems like a great birder. I'd love to meet him. He was born, I know, in 1932, began birding in the 40s, and he's a great resource for how birding has changed and bird habitat has changed in Ottawa County. So what he writes in the intro of this book is he indicates that there's been significant grassland bird decline due to agricultural changes. So Ottawa County used to be a lot of hay fields. Cows used to be out in hay fields as well. Now, if you drive around anywhere, it seems like in Ottawa County, it's like monoculture crops, like it's corn, soybeans. You don't really see too many hay fields around. If you do see a hay field, they mow it completely differently than they did back in the day. So the mowing techniques have changed. When I first learned about that, that was with Carl and Judy out in Coopersville. There's some fields in Coopersville out there where some bobolinks can be found. I don't know if anyone's been out there. It's a really neat spot. But Carl and Judy said, yeah, it's great, bobolinks are here, but that farmer's going to plow his field like he always does, and those nests are all going to be decimated, right? So the way we plow things has also changed, and it's been a problem for grassland birds. That's why we see that 53% drop. Birds that used to be common in Ottawa County that you can barely find now are Henslow sparrow. So I think some people saw it this summer, and I think it was maybe the first time in 10 or so years that a Henslow sparrow's been found. But that in Jim's, when Jim was a kid and when he was in high school, you could find Henslow sparrows everywhere throughout Allendale. Upland sandpipers too are really difficult to find. Northern bobwhite, we're at the northern range of their breeding area, but they used to be more common in the area. Now I think they're almost considered extirpated, or they are, Jeff? Yeah. So, or they're release birds if you find one, most likely. And finally, which I find crazy, this would be an awesome bird to find on my life list, is a barn owl. So has anyone seen a barn owl in the wild? And you have?
In Alabama, not
In
here.
Alabama, yeah. But barn owls used to be common. That's what Jim talks about. And the mentality, though, of farmers at that time was barn owls are pests, they're going to eat our chickens. So he talks about how barn owls were often trapped at the time, which is heartbreaking. They don't eat chickens, they eat mice. But that's an example of a bird we unfortunately can't find just due to some of our human errors and also due to the lack of grassland habitat. So the annotated checklist also provides a lot of details on declines that have been recorded in birds throughout Ottawa County. So some of those include birds like golden winged warbler, used to be uncommon but could be found in the county. Red-headed woodpecker, which we do find periodically. I think all of us, if you go out birding frequently enough, you find it, but used to be more common. And also the common nighthawk, like I mentioned. I don't know of many spots where you really can find that bird. I know downtown Holland seems to be a reliable spot, but if anyone knows anywhere else in Ottawa County, let me know, because I don't think there are many great locations for them, sadly. So going on to Wingspan, so I thought this was a great resource to explain what type of bird habitat needs to be conserved. So this definitely simplifies it. So with the Wingspan board game, you have these different bird cards like the osprey or roseate spoonbill, and you have to provide them food. So like an osprey will eat a fish, and then once you give it that fish, it can then go into your wetland habitat, which is where it's found. So it's a wonderful game, highly recommend it, and also a great way to simplify bird habitat. So this separates bird habitat into forest, grassland, and wetland. So that's what we're going to do. Obviously there's a lot of overlap. There's floodplain forest, which would be forest and wetland, but we're just going to make it simple and split it up into those type of habitats. So eastern forest birds have lost 17%. Wood thrush has, I'm guessing a lot of people have heard that beautiful call, right? But they've gone down, there's 60%, so 60% loss over the last, from 1970 to 2020. So that's substantial loss as well. And boreal forest birds doesn't necessarily relate to Ottawa County very loosely. We don't have boreal forests in Ottawa County, but they do have it in the UP and they have it up in Canada. But on occasion we see these wonderful birds called evening grosbeaks. So has anyone seen an evening grosbeak? Yeah, I love those guys. They're the gold blue birds, I like to call them. They have the Michigan colors. So, but they've lost 90%. So that's substantial numbers of losses for those birds. So one great resource that I was able to find in my binder, which is over there, so that binder I did a bunch of research on habitat conservation. One thing that I read was this great document put together by the American Bird Conservancy in Michigan and Audubon about forest habitat conservation. So I'm not a forester, nor are we going to have a PowerPoint all about forestry. I could probably talk the whole time about that, but a couple things that are considered with forest habitat includes your vertical and horizontal structural diversity. So vertical being your understory, midstory, and overstory, so the height of your trees, right? So shrubs would be your understory, and then some of the big large oaks or something we have would be your overstory. But you also want to look at a forest, you want to see its horizontal structural diversity. So the red pine, right, Jeff, that's like the trees that we have, I think, in a lot of Ottawa County from the Civilian Conservation Corps. But that would have very poor horizontal structural diversity. It's all, and really poor vertical structural diversity as well. It's all the same height tree, and they're all packed tight together, and thus isn't great habitat, unless if you're a pine warbler, I think, can be found there. Other things are gaps. So gaps are actually good in a forest. You want to see regeneration. We'll go into some more detail about that. Things like large diameter trees and snags and conifers provide great habitat for birds, for nesting and roosting, and also locations for feeding as well. And then downy wood or downed woody material and leaf litter. Ovenbirds, towhees, they love that stuff, right? You always see when you go in the woods in the spring, you see towhees scratching at the leaf litter. That's a way they can get their invertebrates for dinner. And they also, like birds like ovenbird, make nests in those downed areas. And then spacing's the last thing, and I'll go into some more detail about spacing later. So this document has some really cool graphics in it, which I am a visual learner, so I love seeing all these awesome graphics. So this helps kind of make it come alive, where it shows on one axis, it shows overstory, the midstory, and understory. So it shows you the different height of plants and where you could consider the start of the understory and the transition to the midstory. It shows for different bird species where that bird will typically sing and forage, and it'll also show where that bird nests. So some birds will nest in the understory, but they'll forage in the mid and upper story, and that's where they'll get their food. It has a vegetation key, which shows different forest types, which include conifers, hardwoods, snags, shrubs, ferns, leaf litter. Those are all the different parts, that you see in a forest. And then this habitat association that it simplified down to was hardwood forests, which we typically find down here in Ottawa County. There's mixed wood, which is like a mix of hardwood and softwoods, which are conifers. There's oak pine, and then like softwoods, which are conifer forests. So here's some of the cool graphics for some really amazing birds. So one of them is the chestnut-sided warbler. So does anyone know what chestnut-sided warblers like in terms of habitat? You know, Malcolm?
They like shrubby, open surface.
Yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, they love shrubs. So they need a forest that has been either removed through harvesting from timber, or forests where trees have all gone down. So an example of a great spot for chestnut-sided warbler right now is Sleeping Bear Dunes. Has anyone been up there since that huge windstorm they had? Maybe, I want to say it's about 5 years ago. But Alligator Hill is a hiking spot there. There used to be these beautiful trees there, but those all have since gone down. A lot of shrub habitat now. There's chestnut warblers everywhere, and it's a really fun spot to see them. So red-headed woodpeckers, so they need hardwood, snags, and they typically like kind of wetland areas. So not too thick a forest, but there need to be some large trees and kind of wetland areas. So moving on, the ovenbird. The ovenbird looks for leaf litter, right? Because they like to nest typically in the understory. They search for invertebrates for food, and they make their nests using that leaf litter and down wood. But they're also found in like very thick forests, typically that are hardwoods. That's their preferred forest type, but they can also be found in mixed or oak pine forests as well. Here's another graphic that I like as well about forest birds. I think this would be a cool poster to have for Malcolm, but shows different forest habitats. So it's like a graph again where you've got your overstory, your midstory, and your understory. And then it talks about conifer forests, mixed forests, and hardwood forests. And it shows what different type of birds in Michigan are found where. So example, an American woodcock can be found in the understory. And they typically like the shrubby edges of a forest. They also need an area where they can do their breeding displays that are typically kind of a grassland type area. There are birds then that are like brown thrashers that are found more in shrubby mid-story areas. And then cerulean warbler is found way at the upper story. And those are the type of birds that give us our warbler neck in the spring when we're all looking way up into the tree. So I think that's a great graphic and helps us understand where different birds are found in the forest. Another resource on forest habitat conservation is Restoring North America's Birds. So it's not the lightest reading around, but it's very scientific. Michael might like it as a professor. A lot of research papers, but they have some really interesting information about shrubland habitat, which we talked about, and also on deep forest birds and hostile edges. So in regards to shrubland habitat, we've eliminated a lot of the natural processes that used to occur in a forest with succession. So a lot of us, I guess the mindset is people don't often understand fires, that fires can actually be a good thing for changeover in a forest. At least in Michigan area, out west probably less so. And things like windstorms, like I talked about at Sleeping Bear Dunes, actually created a whole new habitat for different birds. So those type of things can be good. And even timber harvesting. I know a lot of us probably initially think that we don't like seeing a forest being taken down, but in the right circumstance, it's actually a good thing. Example would be Port Sheldon Natural Area, where the chestnut-sided warblers are. So they took down a lot of, I think, red pine there, and now that's been a great kind of shrubby regenerating forest. So guessing, Jeff, you've been there a few times.
Right across the street from me.
Yeah, I figured it was nearby. So it's a great birding location. In regards to deep forest birds and hostile edges, there are a lot of birds that, if they live close to forest edges, will have a lot less success with breeding. So they'll have issues with cowbirds. So cowbirds will come in and lay eggs in their nest close to forest edges. And also predation. Edges tend to have more predators than deep forests do. So one thing that I found interesting is for breeding birds, the best success for a breeding bird was to be over 3 football fields away from a forest edge. So it's a long distance away, and they would have then 70% nest success for this specific study in the mid-Atlantic states. If the bird was only a football field away, they had only 20% success. So as we've seen with forests, forests are becoming fragmented, especially in our counties. So for a lot of birds, it's very important that we have large forest areas like Hoffma Preserve, where you then are further away from edges. So this is a neat graph too. These are some great birds. Scarlet tanager, I'm guessing a few people have seen those awesome birds in this county. But you can see on the graph on the y-axis, it's incidence, so it's, I guess, essentially like the probability you could find one in a forest of that size. And on the bottom relates to forest sizes. So a lot of these birds won't even be found in forests that are smaller than, let's say, 100 acres. Like, you need to have large forests. That's why if some of you guys have these smaller forests on your property, you can maybe find these birds in migration, but likely they don't utilize that space, or if they do, they may not have much success with their breeding, unfortunately. So we talked a bit about grassland birds. Eastern meadowlarks have had a 75% loss in North America, which is also just shocking. Birds like dick thistle have also seen losses, not only in Ottawa County here, but they see losses on their non-breeding territories in South America. A lot of farmers view them as pests, so they shoot them, sadly. So it goes to show that we could do everything right here in Ottawa County, but we also need to promote conservation around the world, right? Because a lot of these birds that we love to see come from South America, and if they're not protected in South America and on their breeding routes up, then we're not going to find them here. So grassland habitat conservation, this is a great graphic from Massachusetts Audubon, which has a really cool grassland conservation program. But these are the birds that they're looking at protecting. Birds like bobolink, which we see as a declining bird in our table 16 here from the Michigan Breeding Bird Atlas. Kestrel, killdeer, surprisingly, and I have to zoom in a little bit, but we've had pretty large losses even in killdeer, which seems surprising because they seem to be ubiquitous, but their numbers have also gone down. Birds like northern harrier too, which once used to breed in Ottawa County because we had enough grassland for them. Now, from what Carl and Judy wrote at least, and Chip in their annotated checklist, you can't find them anymore breeding in Ottawa County. Just find them in migration. So we're going to hit the same thing kind of over and over, but just like forest birds, grassland birds need a lot of area. So there are generalist bird species, let's say like the American robin, that can handle about any habitat in any fragmented area, but a lot of grassland birds like the bobolink need large areas of grassland to be successful. So you can see here, it's a similar thing where you want at least to have 25 acres of grassland. Ideally, you would have 250 acres or more, and then you're more likely to find grassland birds. That's why Allegheny State Game Area is an awesome spot for grassland birds. They have a lot of public land that is available for those birds. So Michigan DNR has some great resources and their wildlife action plans. They put those together every 10 years, so the next one's coming up in 2025. One of their action plans is to preserve prairie and savannas and also large grasslands. So what they write in the prairies and savannas is that only 2% of our original prairie savanna in the whole state remain intact. So a lot of that's been lost due to development, agriculture, and also due to us not allowing fires to happen, right? So the successional process then goes on, and that grassland turns into a forest. So that's a big reason why we've seen losses in prairies and savannas. We talked a lot about large agricultural grasslands too, and those numbers have gone down as people have gone to, instead of hay fields, they go towards corn and soybeans. So those have had a 29% reduction from 2005 to 2012 in the state. So that's been an impact on our grassland birds. And another resource comes from the Nature Conservancy. So this is something that I would love to see us start to utilize as a society, is how we restore crop field to conservation model. So a lot of our parks in Ottawa County, some of them lease some of their land out to farmers, and it'd be pretty cool if that became a public good for us who love nature to see that conserved and turned into a grassland, right? So typical costs to do that per acre from this report is about $3,000 per acre. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail on an example that we did with Beechwood Church, where we asked them to consider some restoration, and that price was about spot on. And it takes 3 to 7 years, it said, for that grassland to really come in. It just takes a while. Invasives are pretty nasty and like to come up first before everything else, so it just takes time. So here's I feel like I've been kind of like doom scrolling, they call it, when you're looking at the news and all the bad news, but we got some good news. So waterfowl is up 50%, so from 1970 to 2020. And birds like geese and swans, which in terms of geese, I don't know if we all love the Canada goose, but their numbers have gone up 1,000%. So yeah, you see a lot more of those. And I was reading a book by Ken Kaufman called Season on the Wind, and he talks about in that book in 50s, 60s, and 70s that geese numbers are actually going down and we're not quite as common, but different programs that were led, I think they're called like honker programs, but a lot of people raised geese and that ended up bringing them back, and now at times we probably view them as a pest. So does anyone have an idea though why wetland habitat and why like waterfowl, let's say waterfowl birds in particular, are doing so well? Spot on. Yep, Ducks Unlimited. So we often, as birders, I guess, have a little bit of conflict with hunters. We really shouldn't. I mean, maybe with some hunters, but there is a lot of common ground between us, right? And the habitat conservation that Ducks Unlimited has done has been incredible and has really brought back a lot of waterfowl species. So they're a great example on how to do this type of stuff, and maybe we need a Grassland Birds Unlimited or something. It'd be awesome to see. Or Pheasants Unlimited, I know they do some stuff too for grasslands. So Great Lakes Audubon, who presented, I believe, last year at our Washtenaw Islands, they talked a lot about wetland habitat conservation in our neck of the woods. So the Grand River Coastal Corridor involves the Grand River right near Lake Michigan, and also includes Muskegon Lake. So that includes both of us in Muskegon County Nature Club and the Washtenaw Islands here. But they have, they're really promoting protecting wetland habitat here. And they have some great resources about that. So one of the wetland habitats that's special to this area that I had not heard of, and I talked with Carl as well, and they had not necessarily heard of that term, is called Hemi-Marsh. So Hemi-Marsh is the location that Carl and Malcolm essentially found that limpkin. Like it just checks all the boxes for where that limpkin was found. So it's got the mix of emergent vegetation in areas where it's shallower. It's also got deeper open water where you can find like great egrets, and that's a really important habitat in this area for wetland birds along Lake Michigan. So some important wetland areas include the Sag, Harbor Island. We're going to talk about that in some more detail later. Bruce's Bayou, Ottawa Sands is also a great wetland habitat, and the county is looking at doing some improvements to wetlands. And Stearns Creek also provides some wetland habitat. So Ottawa County did a marsh bird survey, and this is what I think Beth did.
Yes.
Cindy, right?
Yes.
So Beth did the marsh bird survey for Great Lakes Audubon. And you can see, it's tough to see on this screen right now, but Harbor Island and the Sag had a lot of wetland bird and a lot of bird diversity, which is good to see. It wasn't just the same birds. So those are areas that we as a conservation committee need to focus on and try and see if we can improve those wetland areas. So like I said, this shows where those critical wetland areas are, where they have high priorities based on Audubon Great Lakes. So you can see a lot of the Grand River going, it looks like almost even up to 231 there, has some good wetland bird habitat, and then Muskegon Lake does as well. And Audubon Great Lakes released the Grand River Coastal Corridor Report, so if you want something to read before bed at night, this could be a nice document to read. And they talk about how our area here supports high levels of biodiversity. There are large numbers of migratory birds that travel through the coastal corridor. So who goes birding at Harbor Island? I'm guessing a few people do, but it's great for birds in the spring, right? Hoffman Preserve's also good, pretty close to the lake. Mount Pisgah, right along Lake Michigan, is one of my favorite spots to go. I know, Jeff, you like that spot too. It's awesome for migrating birds. So this area is very critical to migratory birds as they pass through, both in the spring and fall.
There was a message from Beth that Carl and Malcolm do marsh bird surveys as well, so she wanted to make sure they got credit.
Yes, Malcolm, thank you, and Carl. Yeah, appreciate you guys doing that. So
He gets up at 3:45, 4 in the morning. 4:30.
4:30. Malcolm gets to sleep in.
Yeah, it's early.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. So that's great research for us to utilize, right? And knowing how these birds are doing and helps provide. It gets us willing or wanting to help these birds out, right? And hoping that the next time you go out there, you see more, right? So, problem with these areas, there are a lot of high priority invasive species. So things like Phragmites australis or purple loosestrife, which I see a lot of that in Stu Visser Trails, which is a good birding location. But that is definitely a problem as well, and that is not conducive to wetland birds. Those birds were not used to that plant that was brought over from Europe or Asia, and insects aren't used to it as well, so it's kind of a double whammy. So not great for birds and their food sources like insects. So another thing with wetland complexes, so we talked about forests needing large areas, we talked about grasslands needing large areas. Wetland also needs large areas, so fragmented areas don't provide great wetland habitat for some of these birds that are declining the most. So it's critical that we provide that important habitat. The last thing in regards to Harbor Island, so this report says Harbor Island is the greatest conservation opportunity area in the entire Grand River Coastal Corridor. So anyone live in Grand Haven, Muskegon area? I'm guessing a lot of you guys do, but you've probably seen our Peregrine Falcon site knocked down, sadly, and the power plant, has been removed. But that's also now an opportunity for getting that to be restored to be wetland habitat. And we'll go into some more detail on that later. So Cindy explained a little bit how this whole thing started. So working in civil engineering, doing a lot of work with these different townships and counties that do these park projects, and having a couple landscape architects on our team that are always doing park projects, and it seems like they're doing pickleball courts everywhere, made me think to myself, man, why aren't we, is our Audubon Society doing something about this? Do people know that we as habitat nature lovers exist? Do they know that we have a desire for a public good, which is habitat, instead of, pickleball courts are great too, but we don't necessarily need them everywhere. So I reached out to you guys and you said, no, you don't have this. How about you run it? So I've been a committee of one so far, but with a lot of help. We'll go into that later, but I'd love for anyone even in this audience or listening online, if you want to help out even with one project, that's what I need. I need help. It's a big thing for just one person to do, and the board's been very helpful as well, but even for our board, it's a lot for us to handle. So what our committee does is we form all Washtenaw Islands on possible habitat projects. So you can see, for example, Grand Haven's Harbor Island, right? They're on the long road to new life. That's what the article says. We'll go into some more detail on that later. And we also like to set up partnerships with local park staff. So a lot of these people I've worked with my job. I know the Park Township park guy really well. He came to our office today. I talked to him for a while. Grand Haven, I know their manager well from doing a project on Robbins Road a couple of years ago, a storm sewer job by Scoops. And these people are very much willing to meet with us. Other groups meet with them. People who like drones, or people who like pickleball or kayakers. They all meet with these communities to ask to get the resources they want. So that's something that I'd like to see our society do more as well. So we also provide feedback on habitat impacts to communities based on park projects that they've done, and we also look to develop future ideas for habitat improvements, which that's almost a never-ending list, but there are definitely things we can do from that list. So why this committee is needed is who will protect birds and habitat and educate the community on birds and habitat if we do not, right? We're the Audubon Society in this area. Like, we're the ones who need to educate people about birds. We need to get our name out there, our name on signs, doing presentations like this and other presentations in the community just to promote protecting habitat, not even just for birds, but for insects. We've seen monarchs declining as well. There are many different types of wildlife that have been declining, and we're the ones that need to start doing this, right? So I wanted to ask the audience here, what do you guys see, like what do parks consist of? So I'm thinking even especially more like township or city parks. Like, what do you typically see in a township or city park? And if you need a hint, Windstrom Park is a good example. But so Malcolm, what do you see at a park, a typical park? Like, so.
I know like a county park or a state park would be like. I'm not sure about the township or a city park.
Yeah, so like county and state parks often seem to have more habitat, right? But things we see are like pickleball. I'm not calling out pickleballers. I'm guessing a lot of us play here. But,
soccer fields.
Yeah, soccer fields too, right? Like
Playground equipment.
Yep. So we have soccer fields. We have disc golf courses. Yeah, play equipment. We said, right? Which Molly and I have a 19-month-old. We actually love the play equipment now, but that's what a lot of parks are, right? And splash pads, another example. We've got mountain biking is often a big recreation area that's being utilized. Hiking, running, walking trails. City of Holland's looking at turning like a kind of a field area by window on the waterfront into ice skating. So even some areas are being turned to ice skating, which isn't something you can do right now. And then kayaking, right? So Carl and Malcolm know that a lot. So a lot of our local parks, I think Potawatomi just put in like a kayak launch, right? And that's a very popular use to recreate on the property. But with all these things, right, where's the room for habitat and birds and hiking, and a lot of that can be pushed behind. And I know I talked about really large habitats, but even a small 1-acre meadow instead of a mowed grass field provides habitat for something, right? So that's something that our habitat committee is trying to promote. So one of the things we worked on thus far was Park Township Airport Master Plan. So Carl and Judy, I'm going to gush about you guys, how great you were to work with on that, because they've done a lot with me on this habitat conservation stuff so far, so thank you. And I know you'd be uncomfortable if you were here if I was saying that. So they've done a lot of amazing work with me, and they live in Park Township, so they provided information on the master plan. I think, Jeff, I talked to you, and it sounds like you did as well, so thank you. But that's something that we can do, when they're looking at developing these large areas, is to provide input. So a lot of us provided input on wanting habitat for birds, This location was great for a grasshopper sparrow, one of the few spots in the county where you could find grasshopper sparrow. So we provided our input that we'd like to see grassland area to remain there. We also encourage bird watchers to provide input on the master plan. So Curtis Dykstra did a great job too with that, using his resources with Coffee with the Birds and his email list to ask people to provide input. So what ended up happening is the final master plan now proposes approximately 17 acres of meadow habitat. It's not the 25 acres or more that we'd love, but it's still habitat that probably would have not been there or been diminished without the work that the Mannings, myself, and people like Jeff who wrote stuff online, and Kristen Hintz as well from Ottawa County Park. She lives in Park Township, but she also provided some input on that. So here's the master plan. So you can see all the things we discussed of what a park consists of seems to be in this master plan. So we've got playgrounds, splash pads, we have an indoor pickleball facility. So I don't think pickleball is going to go the way of racquetball, but who knows? We've got sports fields, but we've got native meadow habitat too. It's probably more fragmented than Carl, Judy, and I would like, but we fought pretty hard for what we got, and we were in a sense competing against like the drone area too, which isn't going to be best for our grassland birds, having drones and planes fly over it, but they had utilized the space before, and they also fought for their cause too, right? So all of us in a sense kind of got a piece of the puzzle, and maybe not as much as we all would have wanted. So we were also involved this spring with Beechwood Church. So Beechwood Church is in Holland. They're right by Sioux Visser Trails, which is a great birding location. So last fall, a few of us noticed a mountain biking trail that was being cut in right next to Sioux Visser Trails, right where the eastern screech owl nest box is, where it commonly nests. So Carl, Judy, and I walked that area. We knew at that point they weren't going to change their mind. It was going to become a mountain biking trail, and mountain bikers need their recreation space too. So we at least provided some input on habitat impacts that we saw from this work. One of the biggest ones that we wanted them to address was having that trail so close to Sioux Visser. So that trail is really close to a wetland area where we can find a lot of different bird species. A lot of migratory bird species use that west trail when you walk into Sioux Visser, and the screech owl, which I'm guessing a few of us have seen that bird in that nest box. Such a cool bird. But we were worried about bikes zipping by and how that would impact that bird. So what we ended up doing is we put together a report. Michael did a great job reviewing it, providing some insight on what things we could change. And what ended up happening is that trail got removed. So it wasn't that hard. We just spent a little work, and we were able to get that trail relocated. And Beechwood and Memba also, we built a relationship with them. So we reached out to Beechwood and worked with them even to start considering turning some of their grassland, their mowed field into grassland habitat. So they ended up contacting the Outdoor Discovery Center Conservation Services and got that priced out. So their little less than 2 acres grassland was about $7,000. It's not cheap to do. Unfortunately, the church did not have the budget and funding for that. That's where I wish our society and all of us had unlimited funds, because I think we all just pay for that. So it'd be great bluebird habitat. I know we see a lot of bluebirds in that area. But at least they got them thinking, and I think that's something they told me that they're maybe looking at putting in the future, is converting that to meadow habitat. Another thing too is something small, and this was another thing with the Mannings, so I keep calling them out. But Carl, Judy, and I were at Coopersville Wastewater, which is a weird spot to go birding, but it's actually a great location. And interestingly enough, they have a really large topsoil spoil pile at Coopersville, which some of us climb up to the top of to look into the ponds at all the shorebirds. But that's great bank swallow habitat. They're looking for that type of structure. A lot of our rivers in this area don't have the banks that like a Muskegon River has. That Molly and I have gone kayaking on that, tubing, and they have some large banks where you see a lot of bank swallows. But this topsoil spile was one of those few spots where you could find bank swallows in the county. So I had worked with Coopersville on a water main project, and I knew their manager well, so I reached out to him and said, hey, like, do you guys think with this topsoil spile, could you just leave it for 3 months during breeding season, right? And I gave them kind of a range when they shouldn't touch it. And my understanding, Carl and Judy, who had been out there more than I had that summer, that they actually did preserve that, which is cool. So it's small asks like that, but not having a bank swallow's nesting area be collapsed by an excavator grabbing topsoil to bring it somewhere else is a small thing, but it makes a big deal to those little birds. So we'll talk about the future of the wastewater plant too later. So I don't know the lights here.
I think they're on a timer
Yeah.
or a motion.
I'll just keep going in the dark. So something that Carl and I think Malcolm, are you part of My Birds too? Michigan birds with great, yeah. And I know Cindy, you are as well. Beth is, and Curtis Dykstra, he's listening, he's part of that too. So one of these things that we joined as a board and was to join the My Birds movement, Michigan Birds movement by Great Lakes Audubon. So Michigan Birds run some, they address 3 urgencies: the state of our birds, which I talked about perhaps even ad nauseum, ecological threats that are facing birds, which we've also talked about substantially in this presentation, and funding challenges. So we talked about Ducks Unlimited, right? Hunters and fishermen, their numbers are actually going down. So there are less and less people doing that. And who are the big payers into the conservation movement by states? So Jeff, I know you like fishing, right? But like a lot of that money goes into conservation. So with those declining numbers, a lot of preserves in state parks or state game areas like Allegan State Game Area or Shiawassee, they have less and less funds to deal with to help habitat, not only for game birds or fish, but also for some of the birds that we like grassland birds that you don't hunt, right? So the goals of My Birds is to increase public awareness about birds. So we did an Ottawa Sands hike. I know Carl and Malcolm are there. I think Cindy was sick and missed it. But we did an Ottawa Sands hike where we talked about the My Birds program. Curtis and I did a really fun event at Trail Point Brewing. So everyone who came got a free beer. So that's a reason in itself to come. But we talked more about the My Birds movement. Beth did a great job presenting about that. And then Curtis ran a Pictionary event where you had to draw birds out, which was hilarious. And then I did a trivia event all about birds. So that's like a way for us to educate everyone about My Birds and the lack of funding opportunities. So what My Birds is hoping to do is explore new funding opportunities for state game areas and these type of habitat areas. So that includes things like the duck stamp. So hunters purchase the duck stamp, as I believe, as a part of their license to shoot a duck. But we as birders could buy this duck stamp. Doesn't mean we're going to shoot the duck. Probably, I don't know if any of us in here are hunters, but that duck stamp is $25, is my understanding, and pretty much all of it, it's very low overhead, goes straight to conservation. So that's a great example of something simple you can do. You can buy every year's duck stamp and have a really cool duck stamp book with all the beautiful artwork that they do, and it goes straight into promoting conservation. Other things include a migratory songbird habitat stamp that they're looking at maybe releasing. So that might be more specific to us as birders. I think we might like seeing a bobolink stamp, you know, knowing that it's not going necessarily towards hunting. And also things like non-game wildlife funds or adopted game area programs. They're just trying to come up with creative ways to start getting funding into these areas. So obviously I keep saying I need help. So if anyone wants the help, it's not a big commitment, but we'd love if you have an area you're passionate about, a park you're passionate about, in Ottawa County, and maybe I'd love to do Muskegon County too, but let's start reaching out to these people and getting involved and promoting wildlife habitat. Some of our biggest priorities that we've talked about a few times as a board that we're really going to push as a society here is Harbor Island. So we'll go into more detail on that. Also the J.H. Campbell coal power plant. So that's in Port Sheldon, that large coal plant. That is our other peregrine falcon spot. Sadly, that seems like that's going to, they're going to remove that smokestack and get, I think the power plant shutting down, is it 2025?
That sounds about right.
Either end of 4 or early 5, I believe. They're shutting down the coal power plant. So that's good news in itself, but we'll talk about some of the challenges of that too, what that's going to mean for that area, because Consumers owns a lot of land in that area. Other priorities too, I'll go into more detail on those later. So this was something too, this is Jamestown Trails. So this is right near the 32nd Hudsonville exit. So Memba, after we had worked with them on Beach Road Trails, they said, hey, come on out and look at one of our future projects and let us know what your thoughts are on it, about habitat, and any opportunities you think we could have for partnering. So Curtis Dykstra and I in July went out there and walked some of the trails, and we have some opportunities there in my mind for partnership. It's not necessarily a large forest. Curtis and I seem to find more generalist birds in that area than specific forest birds. So mountain biking will obviously have an influence, but we're not as concerned, I guess, about the forest protection. But what we do see as an opportunity is there's a lot of cornfield here that Jamestown uses for, I think they just lease it out to farmers. And they utilize that for, I guess, income on their end for cornfields. But we could have some pretty large grassland habitat if we as a community and maybe other nature groups could encourage them to see if they would be willing to convert all or part of it to grassland. And that'd be a sweet spot then for some of us to go birding and find bobolinks. So Harbor Island, they have some future planning too. This is from their master plan that they have. So that's something that we as a society want to provide input on. We want to work with Ottawa and Great Lakes also on that because they view this as the greatest conservation concern in all the Grand River Coastal Corridor. And their timeline right now, it's probably a little difficult to read, is they have a lot of contamination issues. So MLAC, there's a lot of detail on. They have a PFAS contamination and coal ash, some issues with coal ash as well. So their main priority now is to clean the island up. And once the island's cleaned up, they're going to start planning. So in 2025 to 2028, they're going to start a redevelopment plan for the island. So that's where we need to get involved and get our voice heard. That's the second most, I think the second most number of species have been seen in Harbor Island in the whole county. So like Holland State Park has the biggest diversity and Harbor Island second. So you get a lot of birds at Harbor Island. And then redevelopment will occur 2028 to 2033. So this is Consumers Energy Power Plant. So this red monstrosity, I highlighted all of the land that Consumers owns using GIS. They own a large part of Port Sheldon Township, in case anyone didn't know. So when they leave, that's going to be a huge tax base loss to the township. Estimates from what I've heard is they're almost 50% of the tax base of the township. So if Consumers all of a sudden goes up and leaves, and we preserve every acre of that, Port Sheldon won't have half the money that they had before. So unfortunately, a lot of that's going to be redeveloped. So with how much Port Sheldon's growing, I bet a lot of that will be neighborhoods or something along those lines. But we do have some opportunity there with grassland preservation. So I wish Curtis was here and I could ask him, but did anyone go on that field trip with Curtis, the Campbell Power Plant? I'm guessing people did not.
I couldn't.
This is a great little location within the county for grassland birds. They have large areas of grassland fields of different, through the different successional processes, and you can find a lot of grassland birds there. So in my mind, that's a great habitat opportunity for us to try and promote, to get that preserved, maybe turned into an Ottawa County park or something like that. As that would be a great spot for us to find grassland birds in this area. So has anyone been to Helder Park in Holland Township? Cindy has? So Cindy, what's special about Helder Park? I'm putting you on the spot. But
It has a big grassland area.
yeah, so this whole thing here is grassland area right there. I think it's 70 acres or so. But it's one of the few spots you can get bobolink reliably there.
Eastern
which is really
meadowlark.
cool.
Meadowlark.
Yeah, meadowlark. There's a lot of meadowlarks around there too. So that's something where I see as a partnership with Holland Township. I know their parks guy there. I've worked with him on bike fest stuff. But we as a society can start meeting with them and talking about how we love that grassland area. Love to see it conserved because who knows, someday it could be baseball fields or pickleball courts or soccer fields or something along those lines, right? So it'd be great to get something like that conserved, and that's something that if I had the time, I would set up the meeting with them, but I'd like to get some more people involved that care about that area to see if we can find a way to get that conserved long-term as grassland. And not only that, maybe get a group like the Outdoor Discovery Center in there to see what that grassland's like, if there's any improvements we can make, and see if we can get more grassland birds. So Park Township also has opportunities besides the airport. They have a large forest area called Cooper Van Meeren Park. It's very little known about because you have to go down a dead-end road to find it, but I know Cindy and I have gone there on our big day bird counts before, and it has some good habitat for forest birds. It's a large area, I think 75 acres. But that park area too has been getting interest from other groups like equestrian groups, and especially the mountain biking community would love to see that as another mountain biking area. So that'd be an opportunity for us too to say, hey, we'd love to have minimal trails through here and keep this as forest, and maybe get a forester to look at it as well and find ways to improve it, and have a great forest habitat area that could maybe produce scarlet tanagers or something along those lines. So another one, this is Hoffman Preserve. So I guess, does anyone see, I want to ask the audience here, but does anyone see any habitat opportunities at Hoffman Preserve with Grand Haven Township? So, guessing a few of us go birding. So, one of the spots I see, and Michael, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of like pine tree type plantations, right, that they have.
It was an old Christmas tree farm.
So
It's 168.
that's probably not great habitat, am I
Right,
correct?
the town, that's part of Hoffman Park now.
Yep, yep. So it's
But
part
they
of.
just built a parking lot,
Oh, they did.
easy access to it.
Oh, okay, right through there.
168.
So maybe a lot of those pine trees are now gone, but if there are some other areas where that's left, that'd be a good location to actually do some timber harvesting and perhaps get some shrubland habitat to come through there, right? Wetlands too. I don't know my invasive species that well. I bet Jeff and Kaylee know them better, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of invasives growing in that wetland, right? So that'd be an area where they could do some treatment of their wetland area in Hoffman Preserve and try and make that a better habitat overall for specific birds. So City of Coopersville, their wastewater plant, they just got it's actually a $65 million grant, and they're looking at moving their wastewater from Coopersville all the way up to Muskegon County wastewater plant. So that's, I want to say it's at least 15 miles. It's a long distance up there. So they are diverting a lot of their wastewater now up to Muskegon County, and that's a project that our company is involved in, is putting in that long pipe through that area to divert that wastewater. And the reason for that, obviously, is cows, right? If you go through Coopersville, Fairlife has a huge dairy right in town. So they needed more space in the wastewater plant, and it ended up being more economical actually to send it north than keep sending it and expanding this plant. So this plant provides great shorebird habitat, has bank swallow habitat. So this, I think, could be an opportunity too. We could reach out to Coopersville, and I'm not sure with wastewater wetland areas, if you can, I would think you could convert that somehow back into just a wetland that could still provide great shorebird habitat, but that'd be an opportunity as well for us as a group. So just about done here, but Ottawa County Parks, Ottawa Sands has a master plan. They seem to be doing a pretty good job and have a good handle on bringing back different habitats, but that's something we can provide input on. Riley Trails has a large landfill area. That's actually my company, Prine and Newhoff, that's our oldest job number. So we have jobs split up by job numbers. So we have a recurring job number since 1973 to go out there and sample the groundwater in that area from the old waste management plant. But at some point, hopefully, that will be done, and that landfill area that's currently fenced off would be great to keep as grassland habitat. I know bobolinks have been found in that area. So a lot of goals here, not enough money, probably not enough support, but purple martins, we got to keep promoting their protection, right? Especially in our wetland parks. Maybe see if we can start encouraging Grand Haven, for example, or Muskegon to put them along their shorelines, right? They seem to like Lake Michigan area a lot. That's where I always seem to find them. Bluebird Trail is another example, you know, like I talked about with Beechwood, you could have a meadow with bluebird habitat. We could consider adopting a park getting our name out there. You could adopt Hoffma, for example, or adopt Stu Visser, popular birding locations, just to get our name out and hopefully get more people interested. We can also, I'm trying to read this, park cleanups, that would be part of the adopting. We're looking at using, as a board, we've been discussing how we can utilize some surplus of Washington Island's Audubon funds towards conservation. So I'd like to say we don't have that much conservation funds, so don't get any big ideas. We're not buying any property or anything, but trying to find ways, even small, to help with habitat conservation. Chimney Swifts, I would love to see these type of chimneys, everywhere. Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Just quickly, after the meeting, if anybody has any information or has ever done anything with chimney swift towers like that, could you please see me before you leave? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. I have not, but I would love to see chimney swift towers like that, especially they seem to be more commonly found in downtown Grand Haven, right, in the city of Holland. I don't see them necessarily out, like you probably don't see them, Jeff, where you live very often, but it'd be cool to do a chimney swift tower like that somewhere and maybe sponsor that. Maybe at Spring Lake, where Carl teaches, right? Wouldn't that be cool, Malcolm? Have a chimney swift tower. So I think that could be an opportunity. Nighthawk habitat, there are different things you can do to promote nighthawk habitat by having gravel surfaces on roofs, invasive species remediation. When I first met Jeff and Kaylee, you probably wouldn't even remember this, but we were birding and you guys said, oh yeah, we're going to a garlic mustard pole after this.
Oh, yeah.
So type stuff like that, right? Like makes a big difference.
It's all interconnected.
Yep, exactly. So, nest boxes for birds, habitat and school projects. So, I'm going to call out Carl again, but I know you're starting a great little birding community at Spring Lake, but you could do habitat projects there. We could continue partnership with Memba and educate them on how to think through habitat and mountain biking, and also we want to get youth involved. So, it's good we have Malcolm and Jordan here. So, thanks for being involved. So last slide here, guys. I know I've been talking on and on, but I want to at least end with some optimism, right? So when you guys think of Chicago and Chicagoland, we think of urban sprawl, suburbs everywhere, right? Like that whole area is just, it's all pretty much developed. So Bird Conservation Network of Chicago did a study on the 6 most populated Illinois counties right around Chicago from 1999 to 2020. And in this area, their managed lands are only 9.5%. So I don't know what our Ottawa County managed lands are. I would think it'd be pretty comparable. But they've actually, because they have managed lands and they manage things well, they, of the 104 birds they surveyed, 56% are stable or increasing. So compared to the rest of the state, which is more rural when you think of Illinois, they only have 37% that are stable or increasing. So this urban, suburban area is actually doing a better job managing lands and helping bird species than the rest of rural Illinois. So as Ottawa County continues to grow, Muskegon County changes, Allegan, Kent, like we have a great opportunity if we try to promote land management, we can actually see similar results to that. And just one last fun fact, Hensel sparrow, they call that the greatest concentration of Hensel sparrows in the entire country. It's in the Chicago area, which is crazy. That's a grassland bird, but they have the greatest concentration in urban Chicago because of all the large grassland habitats they promoted. So, love to see our organization and others around us and other entities to try and see these type of numbers, right? And see habitat growing in our area. So, yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
If you get questions, will you repeat them for the?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a few minutes for questions. Yes.
Let's listen to this.
Well, people think of a question. No, was there a question?
Yeah, Scott?
Go.
Oh, you go ahead, Scott.
Okay. Well, one thing, I guess, I'm curious on the Fort Sheldon power plant.
Yeah.
Have they actually announced what they're doing after they take down? Because they just built all new transmission lines to that place. I'd be surprised
Oh, really?
they're not, there's something in the works gotta be in the works there.
I heard they were
Take down-
postponing
Repeat the-
decommission.
What's that?
I heard they were
Repeat the question.
postponing.
No, I don't mean just the whole plant part of it. I mean, I understand what you're saying about, but they just plowed a whole bunch of money in the hole. I mean, you don't do that if
Well,
you're
they
even.
did all kinds of stuff back there, right? But they were not gonna, keep it, they're gonna keep it running back there. Because they're not meeting the goals of all the, renewable energy, the amounts. With the growth that we're having in Ottawa County, it's kind of like yin and yang thing, so that's causing the problem. So this is what I've heard, I don't know if that's true or not completely, but, they're supposed to, what did you say, 27? I think it's.
Yeah, I heard 25, so I'll repeat the question just so online
Well,
viewers.
I guess
Yeah.
my main one is, yes, they may be delaying or at some point shutting down the coal, but are they planning to put something else in there, either from a renewable standpoint or gas generators or something that doesn't,
Mhm.
I guess, saying all that land's gonna be available, maybe filled with solar panels.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what Scott's wondering is what if they have plans to utilize that land in any other ways at the consumer's power plant. So I don't have much of an idea. I get all my sources generally from MLive, right? And I haven't seen an MLive article on that yet, but it does seem like what you're saying, that they would want to utilize that land somehow. They own a lot of it, right? And
They pumped a big amount in to, I mean, that wasn't cheap for what they just did.
exactly, yeah. So they put a lot of investment in the land now to get rid of it. So
I feel maybe I did receive some pamphlet or flyer from Consumers Energy about future plans for that. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there's got to be a combination of certain things to retain the tax, income for the county or the township, but then also preserve some of it as well. So, but yeah, I thought it was 2024 or 2025, but yeah, as you said, sometimes projects take longer than you
I
think.
just see that much over land
Yeah.
and solar panels being one of the.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
You
you're
just
right
could
on
see that
that.
all covered in solar panels.
Yeah,
Entirely.
yeah.
Well, it's not only Fort Chilton Township, but the Grand Haven School District. I was on the school board for a little bit, and that's hugely impacted. So, our taxes have been really very low compared to other districts because of Fort Chilton or because of the power pole. So that's going to affect things a lot. So,
Yeah.
I mean, people really should be cognizant of what's going on and make sure they're attentive to it and see if there's
Yeah.
any way, as you pointed out often, how to sway things.
well, good, yeah. No, I appreciate the insight on that. I would love any involvement on seeing if we can be part of that plan, right?
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah, definitely.
Ottawa County Parks already has a seat at the table on what that future development's going to look like, but it'd be great for some of us as birders as well to be involved in that. And like you said, it doesn't just impact the township. I didn't even think about the Grand Haven Public Schools, but yeah, it'd be a huge loss for them as well with that tax base come on. So they can't just turn that all into habitat, unfortunately, but it's we want to protect at least the right habitat there too, if we can. So, Cindy, you have one?
I read an article in the Grand Haven Tribune, I think last week, about Duncan Woods here, which is not a critical hot spot that I see a lot of eBird reports at, but they're building some exclusion fences to study the habitat loss there because of all the wild deer or the deer populations that are eating everything. So there is no low scrub growing up, and we're just getting older trees there, and so the forest won't be there if we don't protect it. So just a local here in Grand Haven spot to I haven't gone out to look at them yet, but I think that'll be interesting to watch as they learn from that project. I think the DNR is doing that one,
Yeah, that's interesting.
but I'm not positive.
Yeah, deer are a bit of pests, so we might need more hunters, I guess, to take out some deer. So, good, I'm all set, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.